Hello and welcome once again to the Tagore Festival 2021. This festival is hosted by Visva-Bharati with Tagore and supported by Multicultural New South Wales and Parramatta Motor Group. In a few days, we will be approaching the season of monsoon or Borsha in Bengal, which happened to be the favorite season of Rabindranath. Today, we bring you a very special session focusing on earth, nature, and elemental life in Tagore. To take us through this journey, we have with us today two very special guests. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce them to you all. Ananya Datta Gupta has been teaching at the Department of English and other modern European languages in Visva-Bharati, Shantiniketan for over 18 years now. She did her MPhil in English literature from the University of Oxford with a Felix Scholarship and later did her PhD from Jadavpur University. Apart from publishing in academic journals, Ananya takes an active interest in writing creative non-fictions, travel experiences, and more recently, self-illustrated poetry. Ananya is also well-trained in Rabindra Sangeet. She began her training in Rabindra Sangeet at a very young age from her mother. Later, she had the privilege to train both in Kolkata and Shantiniketan under prominent gurus like Sri Mohan Singh Khangura, Srimati Shanghamitra Gupta, Srimati Manini Mukhopadhyay, and Sri Chandan Basu Rai. Our second guest today is Arina Mukherjee Roy. Arina is a well-trained and well-known practicing Rabindra Sangeet artist of the present generation. She was awarded an MA degree in music with a gold medal in Rabindra Sangeet from Visva-Bharati University. She has trained under gurus like Srimati Maya Sen, Srimati Shagota Lokhidas Gupta, and Srimati Tushti Bhattacharya. She received many awards for her singing talent, including a national scholarship from the Department of Culture. Arina is an enlisted artist for both All India Radio and Doordarshan. She regularly performs in TV channels and in live concerts, both in her hometown Kolkata and other parts of India. So, without further delay, let's welcome both Ananya Datta Gupta and Arina Mukherjee Roy onto the screen now. Ananya Arina, welcome to the Tagore Festival. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you both. I think, Ananya, kind of what we planned today is that you will take us through a lot of references and a lot of the things. Today we are talking about earth, nature, and elemental life in Tagore, right? So you will be taking us through this journey, and we have also Arina with us. I think she will be singing some songs for us. So,
Yes,
Ananya,
that too. I'm looking forward to the songs.
So, Ananya, over to you. How should we begin?
Well, to begin with, it's such a privilege and it's very humbling. And humbling also because it's such a gargantuan subject that I feel completely overwhelmed. So I hope and pray that I am able to do justice to it. So I've kind of, so I take a part ethnographic, part kind of referential approach. So I draw upon memoirs written by people who may be referred to today as astromics, who have been here, who spent their formative years here. And I also draw upon Tagore's own writings wherever relevant. And I use the word or concept of ethnography because I'm in that very peculiar liminal position of somebody who has spent close to 19 years here. So I should have been an insider by this time, but I don't really feel like one, or uh, so that's a strange paradox about working in Shantiniketan and living in Shantiniketan without actually having been brought up here. So I'm kind of both insider and outsider. I'm insider to those who assume that I live here and therefore I am one, but I don't think I form an integral part of the community by shall we say, the parameters um, of birth, or if you like,
Mm-hmm.
grooming. So that gives me a very a kind of in between perspective. So that will be my ethnographic point of entry. I wanted to kind of share that methodology right at the outset. Yes, you were
Yeah,
about to say.
I think 18 years or 19 years of lived experience is a lot.
Yes, yes.
And as you mentioned that you have the eyes of both an insider and outsider. So definitely that's a huge thing.
All right, I do hope so. Yes, it's interesting to be constantly kind of rotating that gaze, looking at it from both perspectives. When I read the works and writings of people who have been here for much longer than, and in for that matter, I married into a family who do qualify as ashramik. So they were some of the original, as it were, residents of the ashram community. So I think I've imbibed a lot. I've heard a lot of anecdotes. So Shantiniketan is kind of with me, inside me. But the fact that I came from the city gives me another kind of doubling
Mhm.
perspective. So it's interesting to kind of straddle these two worlds. I think it's quite empowering in
It
certain
is.
respects. So, would you want me to? I wanted to say that as part of that ethnographic angle, I might sometimes punctuate my discourse with maybe slides or photographs that I have
Mhm.
taken. And I think if I have a thesis for this talk, it would be that, well, there are certain remarkable and dramatic continuities, given that, and something that we need to remember in the times of climate change. Shantiniketan, a lot about Shantiniketan has fortunately not changed, even as a lot has changed. So Shantiniketan is a has, I mean, that kind of gives it a certain uniqueness as a, not just as a cultural habitat, but also as a zone, as a geo physical zone, if you like. And I've kind of seen that in the memoirs. There's a continuity from how Rabindranath talks about the place into how people who grew up in his midst and then went on to outlive him chronologically, they have very similar things to say about the physical environment of the place and its import, its significance. So that's something I'll kind of draw upon. And sometimes I will bring in, shall we say, absolutely contemporary perspectives from, say, amongst some of my students who, unlike me, have
Mhm.
been brought up here and can provide that other angle which I somewhere do not feel uh,
Mhm.
automatically qualified to provide. So I thought I would kind of I would draw upon their experiential uh, kind of richness. So that will might is something that might come in once in a while too. So that's kind of how I would lay out the schema of my talk. And loosely speaking, I think I have 5 segments, as I was about to say. One is where I talk about the integrated understanding of ecology and human life. Um, Another where I talk about the seasons, but not purely as seasons, although that might come up in passing, but more in terms of how, terms of what I see as a mythopoeia around seasons and how he conceives of the seasons in ways that are that strike me as being pretty unusual. So he seems to give each season a character,
Mhm.
And that is an idea that I kind of see as having continuity with our present times, because Shantiniketan is one place where this is something that's marked by Promoto Beshi, by Sudhiranjan, and it's remarkable that I have to say the same thing about it, which is that you really can mark the seasons almost calendarically, and not too many places can really um, offer that. So clear demarcation of the seasons, and a remarkable kind of even there's a flow from one to another, it's a seamless flow from one to another, and yet you kind of know that one season has made way for another in terms of the the uh, the the signs and sights that meet you outside. So you don't have to follow the calendar. The calendar is out there, as it were. So that's very exciting. That I wouldn't have known had it not been for these 19 years here. So that's again phenomenologically imbibed. I've kind of, as you said, this is all based on lived experience.
Lived experience, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's begin then.
Let's begin then. So I wanted to very briefly draw attention to, I'm sure, a much quoted poem, Shobhotar Prati, Dao Phire Se Aranyo. I think it's an interesting poem because it posits a choice somewhere, a very English romantic choice, if you like, in the wake of the Industrial Revolution, where he says, where Tagore expresses his ennui with urban civilization, and reaches out to the ancient Topobone kind of paradigm, and both in ecological terms, speak both in environmental terms and in terms of what it means for a flourishing organic sense of human community in the what we loosely call the lap of nature. So I think, but more importantly, Shobhotar Prati, which begins Dao Phire Se Aranyo Lao e Nagor, to me, this is a poem that talks about the connectedness of all life. And this is what really marks out Shantiniketan. You cannot distinguish the community life, the communal life or the communitarian life from the aesthetic life, nor the aesthetic life from the life of trees and plants and the totality of what we call the ecosystem. So we all know that Rabindranath never really believed in boundaries or walls. So he wanted to create a space, a physical space, which he then developed kind of almost from scratch into a community where the boundary between community and the space would not quite be there. And this is reflected in the educational, in the pedagogic thinking or vision as well. The boundaries are broken. So we are all part of the ecosystem, which is why he probably didn't want it to be just an institutionalized space. He wanted it to be a learning space. And I'm sure that may have come up in Shudipto Tagore's conversation with my good friend Laila. So the integratedness and the connectedness of all life is something that we need to keep in mind, particularly in the context of Shantiniketan and its lived experience. And this is where I would draw upon that extraordinary book of Rabindranath's, a late kind of collection called Bonobani. And if you'd allow me to quote just a little there, জড় হইতে জন্তু এবং জন্তু হইতে মানুষ পর্যন্ত যে একটি অবিচ্ছেদ্য ঐক্য আছে, এ কথা আমাদের কাছে অত্যদ্ভুত বোধ হয় না, কারণ বিজ্ঞান এ কথার আভাস দিবার পূর্বে আমরা অন্তর হইতে এ কথা জানিয়াছিলাম. And the quote goes on, but that's exactly where he talks about the integratedness that is also kind of immanent in the poem called Shobhota. And he makes a very interesting offers a contrast between the English romantic gaze and what he calls the Eastern, or well, for want of a better word, Indian gaze on the man-nature relationship. He says for English romantics, it's a discovery, because it's a discovery where discovery can only happen when there's been an estrangement. So you rediscover what you have lost. So for him, the English romantics discovery or rediscovery of nature is like the meeting between a man and a woman, like Miranda in Shakespeare's Tempest, seeing Ferdinand for the first time and exclaiming, "Oh, brave new world." But for Rabindranath, the contrast is with what he calls the more organic sibling relationship. I found that that kind of that point about consanguinity very interesting. For him, the Indian human's relationship with nature is as it were with a sibling, because there has to be no doesn't have to be discovery, because there was never any estrangement. So আমরা আবিষ্কার করি নাই কারণ আমরা সন্দেহ করি নাই, প্রশ্নও করি নাই।
That's
আমরা
so
যে
interesting. That is
আমরা
so
যে
interesting. Yeah. The
আমরা যে
sibling relationship you're talking about, that's interesting.
yeah, so it's for him, it's like man and human and nature, we kind of grew up together. So there was never going to be a split. I mean, one can say that there's something very, very utopian about it, but who knows? I mean, we are disconnected from what our ancient thinking would have been to some extent. So maybe it was that way. In this context, a favorite song of mine, I will come to particular songs that Irina has so kindly kind of is going to demonstrate for us in a moment. But there are also certain songs that I will just refer to in passing because they're relevant to my points. So there's this particular song called Je Ami Oi Bheshe Chole Kaler Dheuye Akash Tole Ori Pane Dekhchi Ami Je. There's one particular line that I find remarkable there. আমি কার সঙ্গে চলেছি, কার পানে দেখছি, যে আমি ধুলার সাথে জলের সাথে ফুলের সাথে ফলের সাথে চলেছি। I cannot help but be reminded somewhere of a grimmer poem there, but Wordsworth's Lucy poem called Slumber Did My Spirit Seal, which is where Lucy, once she is sadly left the world, she is imagined by Wordsworth to have become part of the entire universe, rolling round with earths and stones and trees. That's a very rough misquotation, but you get the point. So this is the point about integration that I wanted to make. Dhulo, jol, phul, pol, they're all part of
the
I am in it and it is in me. So
kind of a sustainable living.
Absolutely. So there is again no barrier. And we'll come to this point again when I come to the segment about the elements, which are both within us and outside. And in this context, I'd like to perhaps dwell briefly on the word Prakriti or nature. I think it's not a coincidence, apart from its, a deeper philosophical, almost Upanishadic connotations, Prakriti and Purush, the gendering there. Prakriti is also the name that Rabindranath gives to Chandalika's mother, if you'll remember. But my point here is that Prakriti is also nature, our nature, Shabhab, Dharmo. Dharmo in the sense in which Rabindranath understood Dharmo. It's not the religion that we generally associate it with. Dharmo is what we are, our nature. So there's an interesting overlap between Dharma and Prakriti, Amader Prakriti. And Rabindranath was particular when it came to the advice he gave to people who were growing up under his wings. He would always say that you have to follow your nature. You cannot suppress what is natural to you. So he would direct people to their to what he saw as their respective I wouldn't quite say destiny, that's a very deterministic word, but to the course of work and life that would be natural to them. So Prakriti shabdota khub important. And in this context, the most, I think, a play that I think he himself kind of singled out as a kind of manifesto would be apposite to mention, and it is in English The Ascetic and in Bangla Shonnashi, where the Shonnashi is eventually persuaded by Bashanti, that poor impoverished orphan girl, to give up on his ascetic rigor and to find himself again in nature. So he kind of offers himself. He is persuaded to give up his rejection of nature and to realign himself with the environment, something that he had rejected. So that he was an ascetic, and he ceases to be one in the strictest sense of the term, not because he goes back to a life of luxury, but he goes back to a life where he integrates himself within nature. Bashanti, once her job is done, she leaves the stage. She's nowhere to be found. But Bashanti is that kindling spirit who realigns Shonnashi with nature. So I think the concept of Prakriti is very important in that in that respect. And since we are going to have a lot of songs, and this is where I would probably ask Arena to sing a very relevant one. But let me introduce the context here. I was thinking about Ganguli Mor Shoibaleri Dol. This might seem an unusual number to begin with, but because we were on the subject of the integratedness of life, as Rabindranath envisioned it, both in his own circle and for Shantiniketan, and it's that's kind of is the Shantiniketan spirit. I think the point here is very nicely made by Sudhiranjan Das in Amader Shantiniketan. Just a brief quote, "এ কথা এখন সকলেই জানেন যে গুরুদেবের বেশিরভাগ গানই আরম্ভ হয়েছিল সুরে, কথা এসেছিল পরে। কত সময় দেখেছি গুরুদেব নিস্তব্ধ হয়ে বসে প্রকৃতির সৌন্দর্যের অমৃত ধারা নিঃশেষে টেনে নিচ্ছেন নিজের অন্তরে গুনগুন করতে করতে। সেই সুরের অঙ্কুরকে পরিণত মূর্তি দেবার জন্য কথা যেন আপনি আসতো। আর যখনই এই রকম সুরের স্রোতে কথা জুটে একটি কোনো গান রচনা হতো, তখনই সেটি তিনি কাউকে শিখিয়ে দিতেন, নইলে সে সুর অনেক সময় আর তার মনে থাকতো না." And it goes on. But as in Gitanjali, so also in Shantiniketan's communal life, everyone here who has been brought up here, everyone knew how to sing. Everyone. I mean, I have this from all sorts of memoirs, and I also have it from students who have been to Pato Bhavan or Shikha Shatra and have then come into our department. They are extremely versatile human beings, and something that we really deeply appreciate, and I have been deeply influenced by that. So, but the other thing to note about Ganguli Mor Shoibaleri Dol is the metaphor of shoibal or moss. So Rabindranath doesn't have the kind of romantic snobbery that only looks for epic elements in nature. He's okay about connecting songs with something as insignificant as it were, as Shaula or Shoibal. So we could have the song here, maybe.
Let's get Arena back with us. And Arena, if you can do us the honor of singing Ganguli Mor Shoibaleri Dol.
গানগুলি মোর শৈবালেরি দল, আহা গানগুলি মোর ওরা বন্যা ধারায় পথ যে হারায় উত্তম চঞ্চল, আহা গানগুলি মোর শৈবালেরি দল, আহা গানগুলি মোর। ওরা কেনই আসে যায় বা চলে অকারণের হাওয়ায় দোলে, কেনই আসে যায় বা চলে অকারণের হাওয়ায় দোলে, চিহ্ন কিছুই যায় না রেখে কোনো ফল, আহা গানগুলি মোর শৈবালেরই দল, আহা গানগুলি মোর। ওদের সাধন তো নাই, কিছু সাধন তো নাই, ওদের বাঁধন তো নাই, কোনো বাঁধন তো নাই, আহা ওদের সাধন তো নাই, কিছু সাধন তো নাই, ওদের বাঁধন তো নাই, কোনো বাঁধন তো নাই, আহা উদাসরা উদাস করে গৃহহারা পথের সারে, উদাস ওরা উদাস করে গৃহহারা পথের সারে, ভুলে যাওয়ার স্রোতের পরে করে টলমল, আহা গানগুলি মোর শৈবালেরই দল, আহা গানগুলি মোর।
Right. Thank you so much. That's a favorite of mine.
Thank you, Arina, for the song.
Yes. So just as in that other song, "Tumi je shure agun lagiye dile more," and then multiple others, and I'm deeply moved by, and it was a favorite of my father's. Forgive me for bringing in a personal dimension. Prothomo juger udoyo digongane. So it kind of so music emanates out of nature. Music is not outside nature, which is why Rabindranath prioritized lyric music, melody in particular ways. He was not too much into instrumental extravagance of the Western classical kind. He did respect it for other reasons, but his understanding of Indian music is that it's melodic and it is simple, just like the Bashi. So, which is why very, very interestingly, Bashi becomes almost a catalyst for kindling the phenomenon of music within nature, and over again, multiple songs. We might come back to that when we discuss synesthesia. Tarar Bashi, ba Bashi shune tarara jole utlo. So very interesting and kind of associations that we would normally not make. So he's constantly kind of playing off sounds and sights and elements, as in components of as far flung as let's say planetary objects and the ground reality on Terra, on Earth, in terms of an integrated music, which I believe the Romantics also would have been able to connect to, particularly somebody like Coleridge, and this is why, again, just to kind of round off this segment, Sudhir Ranjan Das kind of ends his memoirs pretty euphorically, and this euphoria is very, very infectious and seems to have been shared by most people who grew up in Shantiniketan at that time. এই রকম পরিবেশের মধ্যে বেড়ে উঠবার সৌভাগ্য আমার হয়েছিল। আমরা ছিলাম আনন্দে বিহবল, অকারণে চঞ্চল। গুরুদেবের ভাষায় আমাদের হৃদয় তখন নবীন ছিল, কৌতূহল ছিল সজীব এবং সমুদয় ইন্দ্রিয় শক্তি ছিল সতেজ। So nature becomes part of your whole sensory experience, sensuous experience. This is so nature is not something outside; it becomes part of your an everyday your everyday reality. So on this note, let me come round to the second segment, which is about the little things, the everyday nature that make Shantiniketan, or has always made Shantiniketan what it is. But before we do that, could we have, I will explain the relevance in a moment, but it would be lovely if, given the time of the year I am at Shantiniketan wise and Bengal wise. Could Arina please sing us that beautiful song Purno Chander Mayai Aji Bhabna Amar Poth Bhole? I'll have something to say about that afterwards.
পূর্ণ চাঁদের মায়ায় আজি ভাবনা আমার পথ ভোলে পূর্ণ চাঁদের মায়ায় যেন সিন্ধু পারের পাখি তারা যায় 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 চলে পূর্ণ চাঁদের মায়ায় আলো ছায়ার সুরে অনেক কালের সে কোন দূরে ডাকে আয় 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 বলে পূর্ণ চাঁদের মায়ায় আজি ভাবনা আমার পথ ভোলে পূর্ণ চাঁদের মায়ায় যেথায় চলে গেছে আমার হারা ফাগুন রাতি সেথায় তারা ফিরে ফিরে খোঁজে আপন সাথী যেথায় চলে গেছে আমার হারা ফাগুন রাতি সেথায় তারা ফিরে ফিরে খোঁজে আপন সাথী আলো ছায়ায় যেথা অনেক দিনের সে কোন ব্যথা কাঁদে হায় 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 বলে পূর্ণ চাঁদের মায়ায় আজি ভাবনা আমার পথ ভোলে পূর্ণ চাঁদের মায়ায়।
Thank you, Arina, for the song. Anunadi, you were saying about telling about the little things.
Yes, I was kind of struck by Arina's implied association. And this is part of kind of our conversations before we sat down today. She seems to have associated the song with summer, the time after Phagun, time after spring. That may be the case, but for me, the song, in terms of its imagery, holds very particular significance because it talks about Shindhu Parer Pakhi. And
Right.
I cannot but kind of associate Shindhu Parer Pakhi with the actual migratory birds who used to come and, flock around what even to this day is called the Lal Bandh. But of course, the Lal Bandh is receding. That's one of the ecological threats to Shantiniketan as people knew it until very recently, and there were a lot of protests about it. So I think things are so. But what as things stand, Lal Bandh may not be there forever. So even as I said, Shantiniketan has continuities. There are ruptures and disruptions too, as in every other part of the world. Time takes over, but the fact that migratory birds used to come here seems to have been noted both by Rabindranath himself and Rani Chando. Let me begin with this very humorous, simple poem that forms part of Bonobani again. এনেছে কবে বিদেশি সখা বিদেশি পাখি আমার বনে সকাল সাঁঝে, probably referring to Pearson.
Pearson, yeah.
He brought over a lot of saplings and maybe birds too. এনেছে কবে বিদেশি সখা বিদেশি পাখি আমার বনে সকাল সাঁঝে কুঞ্জ মাঝে উঠিছে ডাকি সহজ মনে অজানা এই সাগর পারে হলো না তার গানের ক্ষতি সবুজ তার ডানার আভা চপল তার নাচের গতি আমার দেশে যে মেঘ এসে নিপবনের মরমে মেশে বিদেশি পাখি গীতালি দিয়ে মিতালি করে তাহার সনে। And I love the idea of conversation in between a bird and this new, its temporary habitat, or it's naturalized a home through the song of the bird. I found that very, very appealing. And this is Rani Chando writing. শীতে বসন্তে কত রকমের পাখি আসে, এরা সব ভিন দেশি, দুদিনের অতিথি। আশ্রমের উত্তর পশ্চিমে হয়েছে রিজার্ভ ফরেস্ট ডিয়ার পার্ক, which exists to this day. So we used to and there's a particular watchtower we go to, and from that watchtower you can actually see the water body. And until 2 or 3 years ago, it used to be absolutely flocked with godwits and other migratory birds, but they have not been coming that often and in large numbers lately. So we are rather concerned. I'm sure bird watchers also. So খোয়াই জুড়ে কত গাছগাছালি আছে, জল ভরা লাল বাঁধ ময়ূরাক্ষী রেজার্ভোয়ার, জল চিকচিক করে এই দিকটা, শীতকালে লক্ষ লক্ষ হাঁস আসে এই জলে, আকাশ কালো করে আসে তারা, শীতের শেষে আবার আকাশে মেঘ ভাসিয়ে উড়ে যায়। So বারে বারে মনে পড়ে গুরুদেব দেখলে কত খুশি হতেন। So I wanted to bring in the birds. So but on the other side, kind of conversely, you also have Rabindranath. I think this is from Rog Shojjai, and I found it a delightful little poem. You hear about the sparrow, Chorui Pakhi.
Chorui Pakhi.
So homegrown birds, you see a lot of them. You see a lot of doel and moina and shalik and the whole and the parrots too. But here, ogo amar bhore chorui pakhi একটুখানি আধার থাকতে বাকি ঘুমের ঘোরে অল্প অবশেষে শাসির পর ঠোকর মারো এসে, and so it goes on. The most remarkable lines are অন্য পাখিরা কি করে, what kind of memorialization comes their way. They're fortunate. কালিদাসের বাহবা সেই পেলে, তো দোয়েল কোকিলটা কালিদাসের বাহবা পায়, তুমি কেয়ার করো না তার কিছু, তুমি কেয়ার করো না। I love the poem because it reads like, this is the new Rabindranath of the later, as far as his later poetry is concerned, where he made his poetry far more conversational. He was so there are prose lines, as it were. It's freer. It's more kind of liberated. So tumi care koro na tar kichu.
Care koro na.
And so I wanted to contrast the foreign birds with the more
homegrown bird, with Chorui.
That's right. When it comes to Projapati, he seems to again kind of go into a fairy tale mode. He talks about অপসরীদের দোল খেলা ফুল রেণু পাঠায় কেতর দুখানি পাখায় ভরে. So the butterfly seems to have something celestial about it. Something as delicate, fragile, and as small as butterfly seems to have a kind of born from him, or associations with, or seems to have been for him something like a messenger from the heavens. So this eye for the little things is something that I particularly I find extremely striking. I will have a couple of maybe photographs here to show, but let me draw attention to what Rabindranath says about Kurchi in Bonobani. And it's remarkable because he gives it a certain kind of social angle. He calls Kurchi আভিজাত্যহীনা নামের গৌরব হারা. So he's talking in terms of a social hierarchy somewhere, a stratification that is necessarily kind of discriminatory. So think of Chondalika here. So Kurchi is the Chondalika of yes, yes, Chandalini. And তাই তোরে দেবী ভারতীর পদ্মবন মানেনি সজাতি বলে ছন্দ তোরে করে পরিহার, তা বলে হবে কি ক্ষুণ্ণ কিছুমাত্র তোর সুচিতার, সূর্যের আলোর ভাষা আমি কবি কিছু কিছু চিনি, কুর্চি পড়েছ ধরা তুমি রবির আদরিনী.
আহা, রবির আদরিনী.
রবির আদরিনী. এই যে so where he's talking about nature, but he doesn't see he doesn't kind of put aside his social thinking when he's thinking about nature any more than he puts aside his nature thinking when he's talking about social issues. He likes to think of them in tandem. That is the kind of integratedness we have been kind of talking about. Just if you'll allow me to therefore share. Are you able to see this?
Yes, you can see that now.
So this is the Kurchi tree at Uttarayan.
Okay.
So kind of across the grounds from Udayan. And it's in full bloom. There's another one, maybe if I have a.
So what is the time for Kurchi? Like what time do you see that flower now?
To be honest, and that's where I got to know about Kurchi only this spring and late-ish too. So I imagine it's spring bloom because I saw it, and not just in Uttarayan, but right in front of a new kind of apartment building complex that's coming up. And there was this shock of white. It's like almost like cherry. So I have a photograph, but we'll see if I can project that. Just a moment there. Yeah, so that's Kurchi in bloom. So this was kind of late spring.
And the background is, what can I say, the apartment building in the background.
Yes, but that's Bolpur and that's Shantiniketan for you.
That's true.
That's our reality.
And that's Uttarayan, and that's present day.
And the house next door is Prabhat Kumar Mukhopadhyay's residence, and you have the traditional what are called kagoj phool,
or bougainvillea.
So in full bloom, and you have this building complex coming up right next door. So times are changing.
That's true.
Sadly, but let me kind of get back to where we were. So things even more, and that will kind of bring us to Noboborsha, and which is kind of knocking on the door. This is
right.
Kind of end Joishto. Almost
there. Asharosho Prathomo Dibosh.
Asharosho Prathomo Dibosh. And that should remind us of Kalidas and Meghdut, who are all the time on Rabindranath's mind, and who is really the pivot of his essay on Noboborsha in Vichitra Prabandha. But in that same volume of essays, we have one devoted to Kekadhoni, to the call of the peacock. But that is interestingly something after Kalidas he associates with the beginning of monsoon. But what he associates with monsoon, with mature monsoon that has progressed into Sravan, beyond Ashar, when rain is at its heaviest and its densest. Interesting, he talks about frogs croaking. এই ব্যাঙের ডাক নববর্ষার মত্ত ভাবের সঙ্গে নহে, ঘন বর্ষার নিবিড় ভাবের সঙ্গে বড় চমৎকার খাপ খায়. এই যে kind of integrating the supposedly ugly into his his imaginary scape of monsoon, which was clearly his most favorite time of the year. And he actually says that monsoon is the time for poets. So for him, it was everything poetic. And the croaking of the frog is not something he excludes from beauty.
That's true. Mm.
So this is, I think, again, a remarkable point. So there is nothing essentially ugly. In ecology. Everything has its place. There's no room for the idea of ugliness. শচীর কোনো প্রাচীন কিঙ্করী আকাশের প্রাঙ্গণ মেঘ দিয়া সমান করিয়া লেপিয়া দিয়াছে সমস্তই কৃষ্ণ ধূসর বর্ণ নানা শস্য বিচিত্রা পৃথিবীর উপরে উজ্জ্বল আলোকের তুলিকা পড়ে নাই বলিয়া বৈচিত্র্য ফুটিয়া ওঠে নাই ধানের কোমল মসৃণ সবুজ পাটের গাঢ় বর্ণ এবং ইক্ষুর হরিদ্রাভা একটি বিশ্বব্যাপী কালিমাস মিশিয়ে আছে বাতাস নাই আসন্ন বৃষ্টির আশঙ্কায় পঙ্কিল পথে লোকে বাহির হয় নাই he is literally painting monsoon with his words. And I don't know, maybe later on we'd have the scope to perhaps look at some of his landscapes and how this comes up, or those of his famous associates at Kola Bhavan. And in this context, let us also remember I will come in a moment to how kind of the rains were celebrated in Shantiniketan, and this all that happened with Rabindranath kind of indulgently looking on from Uttarayan. Both Rani Chando and Sudhir Ranjan Das talk about how they used to kind of run to Kopai singing all the way, and then would just they would let the stream flood them, inundate them as they kind of held on to some dike or some kind of embankment, for fear of life. You would just let the water tumble all over them, and for them it was one of the purest episodes of fun. বৃষ্টিতে ভেজা, particularly কোপাইয়ের জলে in Shantiniketan is what they would see as elemental nature being allowed to take over their lives. But that we'll come to that maybe when we talk about Noboborsha. Another kind of element of the little things that have been part of the ashram everyday life would be silkworms, and even as it had an industrial craft angle, sericulture is a sericulture institute, and so on. This is Rani Chandra talking about ঘাসে ঘাসে ঘুরে আশ্রমের বালক বালিকারা গুটি পোকা ধরে হাতে তাদের টিনের কৌটো ঢাকনায় ফুটো করা তারা পালন করে গুটি পোকা গাছ চিনে চিনে পাতা ছিঁড়ে খাওয়ায় গুটি ধরবার আগে সব গাছের পাতা সব গুটি পোকা খায় না এসব করে তারা নিজ নিজ শখে এসব করে তারা এরা জানে কয়দিন পরে ফুটবে গুটি পোকাটা জানে এটা প্রজাপতি হবে না মথ হবে রূপলি রঙের গুটি পোকাটা আকন্দ গাছের আর মুখোশ আঁকা বড় গুটি পোকাটা পলাশের এসব কিছু আপনা হতেই জানে এরা such minutiae as what guti poka will give birth to what kind of a butterfly or moth. For them to have known that, I mean, the whole empirical approach to the learning of science, botanical, zoological, is one of the mainstays of Shantiniketan pedagogy, and it's something that my students vouch for to this day. I will have a student coming on shortly to talk about how trees have always been the landmark in terms of which Shantiniketan and Shantiniketanites kind of build their map of the place and also map their memories. But in a moment, Shudhakanto Rai Chaudhuri used to be an entomologist who would actually study them, Kit Potongo. So there was also, if you like, a certain kind of experimental angle to it. And this is very interesting because researchers would share their research uh, with students of the primary school. So you see, there was no kind of a disconnect between higher research and elementary schooling. So ওরা গুটি পোকা ওরা দেখে শিখছে যেগুলো, সেই আবার গুটি পোকা নিয়ে রিসার্চ করছেন সুধাকান্ত রায়চৌধুরী। So you have
yeah, like ওদের কাছে এটা, it is just a fun activity when you think about little children, and then kind of it grows up to the highest level.
Yeah, it goes all the way up to
all the way
committed research and disciplined kind of engagement at an academic level. And this brings me to the last kind of element of this segment, Shiuli pool. I think it's important to note how, like, apart from Akondo, which is supposedly nondescript and therefore celebrated, or Kurchi, it's the tenderness or the delicacy of Shiuli that Rabindranath keeps celebrating, and the life cycle of Shiuli from the end of Borsha, the advent of Sharod, to the demise, as it were, of Sharod and into Hemonto and onto winter, and the generosity of the Shiuli tree, which kind of it gives, is noted by not just Rabindranath but by so many others. And it would be lovely if Irina sings us Shiuli Phul at this moment.
শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল কেমন ভুল এমন ভুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল রাতের বায় কোন মায়ায় আনিল হায় বন ছায়ায় রাতের বায় কোন মায়ায় আনিল হায় বন ছায়ায় ভোরবেলায় বারে বারেই ফিরে বারে হলি ব্যাকুল ভোরবেলায় বারে বারেই ফিরে বারে হলি ব্যাকুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল কেন রে তুই উন্মনা নয়নে তোর হিমকণা কেন রে তুই উন্মনা নয়নে তোর হিমকণা কোন ভাষায় চাষ বিদায় গন্ধ তোর কি জানাই কোন ভাষায় চাষ বিদায় গন্ধ তোর কি জানায় সঙ্গে হয় পলে পলে দলে দলে যায় বকুল সঙ্গে হয় পলে পলে দলে দলে যায় বকুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল কেমন ভুল এমন ভুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল শিউলি ফুল।
Thank you, Irina, once again for that beautiful song. Yes, Ananadi, over to you.
But let's, on this note, move to the third segment of our discussion, where I not only talk about the seasons, but shall we say the peculiarities of the Tagorean imagining around seasons. And I must acknowledge my mother here. She was the one who kind of alerted me to a particular statement of Rabindranath's in Bichitra Prabandho, in the particular essay called Ashar, which begins Grishyoke Brahmon bola jaite pare samosto rasho bahullo domon koriya. So Grishyo is ascetic. We were talking about the ascetic. So Brahmon, সমস্ত রসবাহুল্য দমন করিয়া জঞ্জাল মারিয়া তপস্যার আগুন জ্বালিয়া সে নিবৃত্তি মার্গের মন্ত্র সাধন করে। So Grisho is about self-dispossession or self-abnegation. Interestingly, in Nataraj Ritu Rangoshala, the concept that keeps kind of coming up, popping up, is that of the seasons or nature having a duality within it. Nature is both Shonnashi and Raja. And Promothobishi also notes this. So there is an element to nature that is always ready to, I wouldn't say sacrifice, because sacrifice doesn't quite have that sense in Rabindranath. Sacrifice is extremely not just ennobling, but actually enriching. You gain by sacrifice. So nature gains by giving up its bounty, shedding its bounty, by holding out all its bounty for the consumption and, if you like, immersion of other of those who are so minded. But the other aspect of nature is that it is as bountiful as a king, just as a king is completely resourceful. So Shonnashi and Raja, and that kind of comes up in Nataraj Ritu Rangoshala. But there are so many songs where this aspect of Grisho as Shonnashi in meditative posture keeps kind of coming up. Whereas he conceives of Borsha as Kshatriya. Why? Because লড়াই করে পুরো আকাশটা নিয়ে নেয়, টেনে নেয়।
Right.
Whereas Sheath is Boishyo, because it's very work-minded, according to him. It's all about it's business-minded. It's all about accumulating the crop, the proceeds. So it's oriented towards the connection between, again, very organic, between nature and work, which comes up in songs like Chash Kori Anonde from Julayatan, or Phire Chol Matir Tane. Phire Chol Matir Tane, yes. And we might actually have that song here, Phire Chol Matir Tane.
Because we have Arina with us, let's hear that song.
Yes, please.
ফিরে চল ফিরে চল ফিরে চল মাটির টানে, যে মাটি আঁচল পেতে চেয়ে আছে মুখের পানে। ফিরে চল ফিরে চল ফিরে চল মাটির টানে, যার বুক ফেটে প্রাণ উঠেছে, হাসিতে যার ফুল ফুটেছে রে, ডাক দিল যে গানে গানে। ফিরে চল ফিরে চল ফিরে চল মাটির টানে। দিক হতে ওই দিগন্তরে কোল রয়েছে পাতা, জন্ম মরণ তারি হাতের অলখ সুতোয় গাঁথা, ও সে অলখ সুতোয় গাঁথা। দিক হতে ওই দিগন্তরে কোল রয়েছে পাতা, জন্ম মরণ তারি হাতের অলখ সুতোয় গাঁথা, ও সে অলখ সুতোয় গাঁথা। ওরে হৃদয় গলা জলের ধারা, সাগর পানে আত্মহারা রে, ওরে হৃদয় গলা জলের ধারা, সাগর পানে আত্মহারা রে। প্রাণের বাণী বয়ে আনে, ফিরে চল ফিরে চল ফিরে চল মাটির টানে, যে মাটি আঁচল পেতে চেয়ে আছে মুখের পানে। ফিরে চল ফিরে চল ফিরে চল মাটির টানে।
Thank you once again, Arina, for the song.
And I wanted to actually project this particular image, if you'll allow me, because that's where Holocaustion takes place.
Okay.
It's kind of the song is
Fire chal
engraved.
matir tane. Okay. Yeah.
And you will notice the how song is or music is integrated into this process
Right.
of enlivening the earth with water. So the earth is where all things kind of come together. The other elements kind of come together. I'm deeply struck by that. So the other two seasons are referred to as Sharot or Boshanto. And there's one thing to note about it, after which we'll kind of seamlessly move on to Visva-Bharati, and which Arena is so kindly going to sing for us. He says, তাই তো শরতের নীল পাগড়ির উপর সোনার কলকা, বসন্তের সুগন্ধ পীত উত্তরীয়খানি ফুল কাটা.
Bah.
I have one very lush image of Boshanto in a moment, please, which would really illustrate what he's talking about.
Yes.
So this was on 8th March. So
Okay.
And I wanted to, and this is a tree in full bloom right outside. This is near Amrokunjo. This is right outside the Shantiniketan house. So this kind of blends with the Tagorean association between Boshanto and Shugandho Pit Uttoriokhani, Fulkata. Remind me of this. This is so many years later, but some of these things seem to have remained the same. ইহারা যে পাদুকা পরিয়া ধরণী পথে বিচরণ করে, তাহার রং বেরঙে সূত্রশিল্পে বুটিদার, ইহাদের অঙ্গদে কুন্তলে অঙ্গুরিশে জহরতের সীমা নাই. So he's talking about nature, but he's mythicizing them as characters in different kinds of costume and jewelry. So he's giving a sartorial kind of shape to, and particular sartorial distinctness to each of the seasons. তারা যেন নতুন ধরনের বিশেষ বিশেষ পোশাক পরে নাচতে এসেছে, এরকম একটা. So I found it quite remarkable. Right. So shall we have Visva-Bharati here?
Visva-Bharati, yeah. Sure.
Visva-Bharati, বিশ্বজন মোহিছে, স্থলে জলে নভতলে, বনে উপবনে, নদী নদে গিরি গুহা পারাবারে, নিত্য জাগে সরস সঙ্গীত মধুরিমা, নিত্য নৃত্য রস ভঙ্গিমা, নব বসন্তে নব আনন্দ, উৎসব নব, অতি মঞ্জুল শুনি মঞ্জুল গুঞ্জন কুঞ্জে, শুনি রে শুনি মর পল্লব পুঞ্জে, পিকক জন পুষ্প বনে বিজনে, মৃদু বায়ু হিলোল বিলোল বিফল বিশাল সরোবর মাঝে, কলগীত সুললিত বাজে, শ্যামল কান্তার পরে অনিল সঞ্চারে ধীরে রে, নদী তীরে সরবনে উঠে ধ্বনি, সর সর মর মর। কত দিকে কত বাণী, নব নব কত ভাষা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো রসধারা, বিশ্ববীণা রবে বিশ্বজন মোহিছে। স্থলে জলে নভতলে, বনে উপবনে, নদী নদে গিরি গুহা পারাবারে, নিত্য জাগে সরস সঙ্গীত মধুরিমা, নিত্য নৃত্য রস ভঙ্গিমা। আষাঢ়ে নব আনন্দ, উৎসব নব, অতি গম্ভীর অতি গম্ভীর, নীল অম্বরে ডম্বরু বাজে, যেন রে প্রলয়ঙ্করী শঙ্করী নাচে, করে গর্জননীর ঝরিণী সখনে, হের ক্ষুব্ধ ভয়াল বিশাল নিরাল, পিয়াল তমাল বিতানে, উঠে রব ভৈরব তানে, পবন মল্লার গীত গাহিছে আধার রাতে, উন্মাদিনী সৌদামিনী রঙ্গ ভরে, নৃত্য করে অম্বর তলে। দিকে দিকে কত বাণী, নব নব কত ভাষা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো রসধারা, বিশ্ববীণা রবে বিশ্বজন মোহিছে। স্থলে জলে নভতলে, বনে উপবনে, নদী নদে গিরি গুহা পারাবারে, নিত্য জাগে সরস সঙ্গীত মধুরিমা, নিত্য নৃত্য রস ভঙ্গিমা। আশ্বিনে নব আনন্দ, উৎসব নব, অতি নির্মল অতি নির্মল অতি নির্মল, উজ্জ্বল সাজে ভুবনে, নব শারদ লক্ষ্মী বিরাজে, নব ইন্দু লেখা আলোকে ঝলকে, অতি নির্মল হাস বিভাস বিকাশ, আকাশ নীলাম্বুজ মাঝে, শ্বেত ভুজে শ্বেত বীণা বাজে, উঠিছে আলাপ মৃদু মধুর বেহাগতানে, চন্দ্র করে উল্লসিত ফুল্ল বনে, ঝিল্লি রবে তন্দ্রা আনে রে। দিকে দিকে কত বাণী, নব নব কত ভাষা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো রসধারা, বিশ্ববীণা রবে বিশ্বজন মোহিছে। নদী নদে গিরি গুহা পারাবারে নিত্য জাগে সরস সঙ্গীত মধুরিমা নিত্য নৃত্য রস ভঙ্গিমা।
Thank you, Arina, once again. I think you have a lot to say about that song, Anunadi. You are seeing it from a different perspective today.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful how that one song seems to take us through all the seasons. Besides also connecting the atmospheric changes from one scene to another to the larger rhythm of the universe. So to kind of place the earth and its atmosphere within the larger schema of the universe and its own patterns or kind of invisible movements is a remarkable way, and there's something very Upanishadic about it. Not seeing any again disconnect between the earth and the life beyond, Atta and Paramatta, earthly life and the life beyond, which is why for Rabindranath death is just like a transition. I think it's important to remember the way in which he actually conceived of death as only a kind of change of form, rather than a cessation or a ceasing to be. Because there is no disconnect between the terrestrial life in a manner of speaking. Let me come round to here to the particular season at the advent of which we seem to be situated right now, and remember how he conceived of clouds, and I think it's very unusual. It really makes you think. To him, clouds are special because clouds have nothing whatsoever to do with human life. For him, it's ironic today because of the whole association of clouds with the digital space and
Right.
existence that we have. But for Rabindranath, clouds are and he says as much, clouds couldn't care less where human beings might be or not be. Clouds have an existence that is completely autonomous, completely, as it were, emancipated from the anthropocentric focus of earthly life. And that is ironically the very reason why human beings are so attracted to the clouds, because they follow their own, they have their own trajectory, their own route, and human beings cannot influence that, nor be in any way. So meghe amar kono chinho nai. So I think he thinks about clouds as being a great cure for the egotistical sublime, they're cure for the human ego, because they there's no way you can anthropocentricize the clouds. সে পথিক আসে যায় থাকে না, আমার জরা তাহাকে স্পর্শ করিবার অবকাশ পায় না, আমার আশা নৈরাশ্য হইতে সে বহু দূরে। সেই কারণেই কালিদাসের যক্ষ যে মেঘের কথা বলেছেন, রবীন্দ্রনাথ সেই মেঘের কথা বলতে পারছেন। That is the continuity. The continuity is in the autonomy of the clouds, in the past, in the present, and in future. And while we might remember that beautiful song Chitto Amar Haralo Aaj in that
Megher Majkhane.
But I wanted to draw attention to that the most attractive episode in Sudhir Ranjan Dasgupta's, am I right? Sudhir Ranjan Das, yes. Sudhir Ranjan Das's memoir, বর্ষার দিনে। এখানে আরেকটা কথা মনে পড়ছে, তার উল্লেখ করি। বর্ষার দিনে কালো মেঘে অম্বর মেদুর হয়ে যখন মুষলধারে বৃষ্টি নামতো, তখন আমরা তাড়াতাড়ি গুটিয়ে মাস্টারমশাইদের একজনের সঙ্গে বের হয়ে পড়তাম বৃষ্টির ধারায় ভিজে শরীরটা জুড়াতে। বৃষ্টির জল তখন মাঠের থেকে খোয়াইয়ে গড়িয়ে পড়ছে, আর নানা ছোট ছোট ধারায় এগিয়ে গিয়ে পরস্পর মিলেমিশে মোটা ধারা হয়ে ছুটেছে কোপাই নদীর দিকে। আমরাও তার অনুসরণ করে ছুটতাম বর্ষার গান গেয়ে গেয়ে। It goes on. It's a long quotation, so I don't have time for that. But um, the intimacy with rain is remarkable, and the place seems to have been able to kind of channelize that into the elemental life of the young boys growing up here.
So let me ask you something, Anunadi. Do you still see those kind of enthusiasm in your students or young children who are growing up in Shantiniketan now?
I would imagine not all children, no. Not those who don't have access to the open fields, but those who do, even Shautal lads, they do that. I've seen that for myself, and I've seen people pause, even grown-ups pause to pick up after a Kalboishakhi. Pause. Kalboishakhi spells doom for a lot of Shantiniketan neighborhoods, and so I have to kind of give you the darker side to it. It means tremendous hardships for people living in Shantiniketan, not so much Bolpur, but in Shantiniketan, because electricity connection is snapped, wires get tangled, and and yet people enjoy it. People seem to be unmindful, or relatively not so mindful of the hardships. That is what. But I think a lot of young people still enjoy the rains, if and when they do have access to it. But we'd love to hear Arina sing Jhoro Jhoro Borishe Bari Dhara in this context. I'll have a little bit to say about a different angle to Tagore's conceptualization of the rains here, but only after she has sung the song. Please.
Sure, let's hear that song here.
ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বারি ধারা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বারি ধারা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বারি ধারা, হায় পথবাসী হায় গতিহীন, হায় গৃহহারা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বারি ধারা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বারি ধারা, ফিরে বায়ু সরে, ফিরে বায়ু সরে, ডাকে কারে জনহীন অসীম প্রান্তরে, রজনী আধারা, রজনী আধারা, হায় পথবাসী হায় গতিহীন, হায় গৃহহারা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বারি ধারা, ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বারি ধারা। অধীরা যমুনা তরঙ্গ আকুলা, অকুলারে তিমির দুকুলারে, অধীরা যমুনা তরঙ্গ আকুলা, অকুলারে তিমির দুকুলারে, নিবিড় গরজে সঘনে চঞ্চল চপলা চমকে চঞ্চল চপলা চমকে নাহি শশী তারা হায় পথবাসী হায় গতিহীন হায় গৃহহারা ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বাড়ি ধারা ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বাড়ি ধারা হায় পথবাসী হায় গতিহীন হায় গৃহহারা ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বাড়ি ধারা ঝড়ো ঝড়ো বরিশে বাড়ি ধারা।
Thank you, Arina. It is such a small but such a beautiful song.
Yes. To me, it's a song that brings out Tagore's social consciousness all over again. To me, the the where my mind has always kind of gone and stayed stuck would be Hai Pothobashi, Hai Gotihin,
Hai Grihohara.
Yes. So Adhira Jamuna Torongo Akula Okulare, well, that kind of goes back to Vaishnavite lore and you could think about the Ragmala paintings. But what is so unusual, or not so unusual for Tagore, but remarkable certainly, is where he draws attention to the misery of those who are exposed to the elements and are without shelter. Hai Bothobashi, in the age of cyclones, it's something worth remembering, particularly in the wake of Yas.
Yes, yeah. And last year we had Amphan.
Yes, and there was the Ayla some years ago. So that's kind of how Sharut he associates with kind of a impatience with work. Sharut dake ghor harano daka kaj bholano shure. That's how he conceptualizes Sharut. I'll have I don't know if I have a picture or two of Hemonto. Hemonto is again a time of the year that is very distinctly marked in Shantiniketan. And I just found this very, very evocative. Hemontere bihobol kore kishe cholite পথে হারালো কেন দিশে জানরে ওর আলোর স্মৃতিখানি বিস্মৃতির বাষ্পে নিল টানি. So this is how he imagines the mistiness of Hemonto. কণ্ঠ তাই হারালো তার বাণী অশ্রু কাঁপে নয়ন অনিমিষে হেমন্তেরে বিহবল করে কিসে. So the foggy low light, the dimness of Hemonto has its own very tranquil time of the year in Shantiniketan, and remarkably, again speaking from lived experience, a time when you feel a little drowsy, just as in Phagun, you feel drowsy at the advent of Phalgun, almost invariably, and that drowsiness kind of comes back somewhat in Hemonto. Let me see if I have at least one photograph to show here. So this is Hemonto.
Wow. Yeah, as you said, it's quite clearly, distinctly marked, which we miss in city life.
Yes, but this is not in Shantiniketan proper, as it were. Shantiniketan seems to have receded a bit, but this is one, and I wanted to show you Kash, which is also something that almost with calendrical exactitude, you can see that appears at the advent of Sharot. And then there is this is winter.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, photographs that I took on drives,
Hmm.
you know,
This is beautiful.
in the vicinity of Shanti. So that's where Shantiniketan may still exist,
Yeah.
if not in what is geographically proper Shantiniketan, but mostly it's in Varanasi. And finally, this one. This is. Let's kind of move on from this. And everyone kind of move away out of this segment with just one quote from Rani Chando, where she talks about how the transition of the seasons is something that is marked in terms of change in the kind of flowers that bloom. So ঋতুতে ঋতুতে আশ্রমের ফুল গাছগুলি যেন দল বেঁধে মেতে ওঠে, পথ চলতে গিয়ে যেন পাগল হয়ে পড়ি। ওই ঝোপ থেকে বন জুঁই, বেয়ে ওঠা লতা থেকে মধুমালতী, ওধারের এধারের হাসনুহানা, চামেলি, বনপুলক, বনমল্লিকা, আড়াল হতে সবাই যেন সুরভির আবির ছুঁড়ে মারে মুখে মাথায়। এও যেন এক হোলির খেলা। এর রং লাগে না বাইরে, লাগে অন্তরে। চলতে চলতে থেমে যাই, এ কার সুবাস, ও এ বনজুঁই, এ চামেলি, এ বনপুলক, চারদিকে তাকিয়ে খুঁজি কোথায় এরা লুকিয়ে। So wonderful kind of a play with nature seems to have become part of their everyday experience of the seasons. So on that note, I wanted to move over to the particular subject of trees, because I think it's very special that Shantiniketan became what it was because of afforestation. As you know, when people arrived there, when Rabindranath or Debendranath had arrived, there had been those two lone Chatim trees. Apart from that, it was mostly deforested Khowai. But they took trouble to afforest the place, which is why initially there was a lot of water scarcity and there was a scarcity of food. Rani Chando talks about how they would really yearn to have good vegetables, and it was not really that easy to find food there, but even fresh vegetables, because it was not easy to grow them. So the whole idea of Shantiniketan as a utopian place needs to be contested, because something that Shuniti Pathak had once drawn our attention to at a public lecture. Ashram actually means সবাই শ্রম করে যেখানে, ashram, universal labor. So it took universal labor to kind of make Shantiniketan the green place that it became. It had to be, it's a construction, it's a constructed utopia, where so it had to be made into a utopia.
Right.
That effort was a concerted one, and it demanded a lot of discipline. So that the alterity of the place kind of emanates from the fact that ecology becomes part and parcel of your lived in kind of everyday physical marking of the environment. So you would associate a particular route to a particular house or residence in terms of the trees that you encounter on the way. This is what is
And
so
that reminds me, ironically, we celebrated World Environment Day last week only. And from this year, for the next decade, the theme for the next whole decade is actually restoring the ecosystem. So how ironic is that Rabindranath has thought about all these hundreds years ago, more than 100 years ago.
Yes, yeah, more than 100 years ago now. It's a lot more than 100 years ago.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So this is again Rani Chando. এসবের উপর দিয়ে ছিল ছুটে ছুটে আসা গুরুদেবের কাছে। দিন নেই, দুপুর নেই, সকল কথা ঠিক সেই মুহূর্তে, তাকে না বললে চলতো না। ঝিকমিক আলো, ঠান্ডা রোদ্দুর, মাধবী বিতানের তলা দিয়ে, গেস্ট হাউসের ভিতর দিয়ে, মন্দিরের সামনে আমলকি বিথির ছায়া ঘেঁষে আসে, শীতের হাওয়ায় ঝুরঝুর করে আমলকির ঝিরিঝিরি পাতাগুলি পড়ে মুখে মাথায়, খোলা চুলে, কিছু আটকে থাকে চুলে কাপড়ে, কিছু পড়ে যায় নিচে। So the route itself kind of is one where you come into kind of physical, very, very kind of close physical contact with nature, and you carry that with মাথার উপরে ফুলগুলো পড়ছে, ফুলটা নিয়েই আমাকে চলতে হবে যেখানে পৌঁছানোর। So this is quite remarkable, and I'd love to here kind of play a short clip where a student of ours, Ananya, talks about how it hasn't really changed much from that. It's still about trees. Trees are Shantiniketan is mapped in terms of trees. It's an arboreal place, as it were. So could we perhaps play that clip here?
Sure.
গাছপালা যে শুধুমাত্র ফুল পাতায় মোড়া আর চারটে জিনিসের মতো নয়, সেটা বুঝলাম যখন শিক্ষাসত্রে পড়াশোনা করতে এলাম প্রথম। আমাদের স্কুল ঢোকার মুখে শ্রীনিকেতন বাড়ির ডান দিকে একটা বকুল গাছ ছিল, বিশেষ লম্বা চওড়া নয়, ঝাঁকালো। এই গ্রীষ্মের শেষেই বর্ষার শুরুতে দেখতাম সেই বকুল গাছ থেকে ছোট্ট ছোট্ট সাদা সাদা বকুল ফুল ঝরে পড়ে থাকতো কাদায়, মাটিতে, জলে। আর যখন ঘেমে নিয়ে স্কুল থেকে বাড়ি ফিরতাম, মিষ্টি একটা গন্ধে চারপাশটা ভরে থাকতো। মজার কথা হলো, এই বকুল গাছটা চারপাশটা গোল করে ঘিরে সিমেন্টে কয়েকটা বেদি ছিল বসার জন্য। যেতে আসতে অপেক্ষা করার সময় আমরা সেখানে বসে যেতাম। এই বকুলতলা ছিল আমাদের স্কুল জীবনের অনেক কিছুর ল্যান্ডমার্ক। আমাদের বর্ষাকালের ছাউনি, বাস স্টপের জন্য লাইন, ফুচকা খাওয়ার হুড়োহুড়ি, স্কুল ফেরত আড্ডা, এমনকি স্কুলবেলার ভালো লাগার ল্যান্ডমার্ক। তবে শুধু বকুলতলার কথা বললে হয়তো অনেক কিছু বাকি থেকে যায়, কারণ শিক্ষাসত্র হোক বা গোটা শান্তিনিকেতন, এত রকম গাছ রয়েছে ছড়িয়ে ছিটিয়ে, যে এই সমস্ত গাছগুলোকে ঘিরে আমরা তৈরি করে নিয়েছি নিজস্ব পরিচয়, নিজেদের বিভিন্ন চিনে নেওয়ার ল্যান্ডমার্ক। একটা কথা খুব মনে পড়ে যে শিক্ষাসত্রে যখন আমরা প্রেয়ার করতাম, দুটো সোনাঝুরি গাছের মাঝে একটা গোল করা সিমেন্টের চাতাল, সেইখানে। তো আমরা যখন 11 কি 12 তখন সেই দুটো সোনাঝুরি গাছের মধ্যে একটা ভেঙে পড়ে। আজ ভাবি, তখন যদি সোনাঝুরি একটা ছোট সোনাঝুরির চারা আমরা সেখানে লাগাতে পারতাম, তাহলে হয়তো আরও কয়েক বছর পর আমাদের এখন যে ভাই বোনেরা শিক্ষাসত্রে পড়তে আসছে বা পরেও আসবে, তারা আমাদের মতো একইভাবে সোনাঝুরি তলায় প্রেয়ার করার সেই আনন্দটা খুঁজে পেত। এই সোনাঝুরি তলার কথাটা মনে আসলে আর একটা প্রশ্ন খুব মাথাচাড়া দেয়। এই যে আমরা গোটা শান্তিনিকেতনের বিভিন্ন গাছ, সে পলাশ হোক, ছাতিম হোক, ফাগুন বউ বা বট, প্রত্যেকটা গাছকে জুড়ে নিজেদের মতো ল্যান্ডমার্ক তৈরি করে নিয়েছিলাম। আর স্কুল জীবনের পরেও কোথাও বেড়ানো, কোথাও এতটুকু দেখা করে পুরনো গল্প করার জন্য যে সেই জায়গাগুলো আমরা ঠিক করে নিতাম, এই গাছগুলো যে দিনের পর দিন বিভিন্ন কারণে, প্রাকৃতিক দুর্যোগে হোক, বয়সের ভারে হোক, বা অন্য কোনো কারণে হারিয়ে যাচ্ছে বা ভেঙে যাচ্ছে, এই গাছগুলো না থাকলে আমাদের সেই চিনে নেওয়াগুলোর কি হবে? সেই ল্যান্ডমার্কগুলো যেগুলোর সূত্র ধরে আমরা বন্ধু বা অচেনা মানুষদের বন্ধু করার অপেক্ষায় চিনে নিতাম, কিভাবে চিনে নেব আমাদের বন্ধুদের?
Right. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ananya.
So wonderful how and Rabindranath talks about how trees have almost a kind of primordial, they are a primordial entity. Their existence goes back in time, and trees have a spirit. People who have watched Avatar should be able to connect to that idea. So গাছগুলো, this is again from Bonobani, and I think of the term Bonobani, boner bani, bonero bani ache. Trees have words, forests have words. ওই গাছগুলো বিশ্ব বাউলের একতারা, ওদের মজ্জায় মজ্জায় সরল সুরের কাঁপন। এক্সকিউজ মি। ওদের ডালে ডালে পাতায় পাতায় একতালা ছন্দের নাচন। যদি নিস্তব্ধ হয়ে প্রাণ দিয়ে শুনি, তাহলে অন্তরের মধ্যে মুক্তির বাণী এসে লাগে। মুক্তি সেই বিরাট প্রাণ সমুদ্রের কূলে, যে সমুদ্রের উপরের তলায় সুন্দরের লীলা রঙে রঙে তরঙ্গিত, আর গভীর তলে শান্তম শিবম অদ্বৈতম।
Mm-hmm.
So the duality, I wouldn't call it duality. There is no duality. There's no split. It's about the layering of existence. So there's calm, tranquility underneath. There's a continuity underneath. But even as there is that, there's the transitions, the seasonal diversity on top. So um, there's the one wonderful anecdote where a particular tree looked, the fun anecdote that's mentioned by Rani Chando. Its trunk looked like the tummy of a portly man, and it came to be called Jogodanandar Bhuri. Jogodananda.
Jagodananda Rai.
So the constant kind of equation of trees with human beings it seems to have been an organic part of Shantiniketan discourse. And Rani Chanda makes special mention of the contributions of William Pearson, in bringing trees over and planting them here. And the afforestation is also the reason why there is more rains now. And that it's become a more fertile place. This is something that we could have gone on with. Shantiniketan is also about being mapped in terms of fragrances of nature. And Promoto Vishi has a lovely quote on that, from Chatin Pool to other very special fragrances. Until very recently, I would not have known that shal also kind of has a blossom to it, which is what very fragrant blossom that you encounter all along the drive up Ilam Bajar Road. It's a and they all talk about shal and shal blossom in their memoirs, in the context of shal bithi, but I have encountered shal elsewhere, and it was quite a special experience. So here it goes. So I wouldn't have known that this is shal pool, but
is it? Okay.
Apparently a lady told me it was shal pool. And this drive up Ilam Bajar Road, just outside Shantiniketan. But I'm sure the likes of Promoto Vishi and Rani Chanda would have seen a lot of that in Shantiniketan proper at that time. And maybe students still do. And we were talking about the organic connection between nature and music. But there would have been also an organic connection between nature and the visual arts. So there's wonderful an anecdote from Rani Chanda about Nandalal Basu, who was able to enliven a painting that she had started, where the tree, she wanted to kind of create a perspective where the tree was in the background, but somewhere her coloring seemed to have kind of messed up things, so the tree was constantly kind of jutting into the foreground of the painting. So নন্দদা এলেন, ছবির সামনে বসলেন, খানিকক্ষণ চেয়ে রইলেন, ছবির দিকে বললেন, এই রং কয়টা গুলে দাও। রং গুলে দিলাম। And by the way, they used to make colors, organic colors, vegetable colors. They stopped. Abanindranath seems to have sent word that don't use foreign color, they're expensive, make your own colors. So a lot of that is described in this book. নন্দদা তুলিতে রং নিয়ে গাছের সঙ্গে যেন ভাব জমিয়ে ফেললেন। গাছের সঙ্গে ভাব জমিয়ে ফেললেন। গাছ যেন নড়ে চড়ে উঠল। নন্দদা যেন এদের সবকিছু জানেন কেমন করে এদের সঙ্গে ভাব জমাতে হয়, এদের ভোলাতে হয়, এদের জাগিয়ে দিতে হয়। So some of that seems to have continued into post, the era after Tagore's demise, because Supriyo Thakur talks about how they would have these fun games among themselves, where their three boys would be pulling, with their teeth at that one shal leaf and tearing it into pieces, even as they were deeply conscious of the sacredness of the Tatim Gachil Bedi, where Mahorshi. So you are aware of the specialness of the place, but that doesn't kind of create an awe that um, that is divisive. You can connect with the place at a very at an organic level, despite the historical aura around it. This is very special about Shantiniketan. You grow up seeing special people, and the word that they keep using is সহজ সহজ ভাবে সরল ভাবে নেহেরু এসেছেন তাদের সঙ্গে সকলের সঙ্গে সকলে খুব সহজ ভাবে মিশেছে. So that's probably where the ecological influence seems to have been at its most I don't know intense. So I've talked about Shalpul, and this is where we ought to also mention the fact that Shantiniketan doesn't quite have particular built-in spaces for artwork. Artwork is part of the natural environment.
Okay.
So you are likely to encounter artworks kind of on the go,
Everywhere.
everywhere. So architecture becomes part of ecology, and ecology becomes part of architecture. This is really special. For instance, Pearson, William Pearson seems to have been the architect of, apart from Shuren Kaur, who is who's the foremost name in this context. He's the one who built for Rani Chando and Anil Chando, who was the personal secretary to Rabindranath, the house that was the Matir Bari, was called Mrinmoi. And that is where one would recall that beautiful song Ei Je Kalo Matir Basha, because Choito was also similarly built by combining two kinds of earth. One would be the black clay and the what is called here Shada Mati, the white or white earth, or whiter earth, if you like. And the idea was that it would be small, it would house temporary exhibitions that children and students and faculty and everyone around Shantiniketan would look at, on their daily rounds to work and back. So you didn't have to kind of mark out a particular time to visit a museum. You would be
you are naturally exposed to all these.
Yes, that was the idea behind Choito, which is incidentally an earthen house. And what they noted was that it's almost indestructible, or it was. It may not be. It requires a lot of repair and maintenance now, I would imagine. But the whole idea of Matir Bari being actually more resilient to the elements is something that was noted in this context. So, right. And there is, of course, Talgach. One of the earliest images of Shantiniketan would be the Talgach. And please remember Taludhaj in this context. Yes, it was the residence of one of the most endearing teachers, Tejesh Chandra Sen, who's mentioned by everyone, including Sayyid Mujtaba Ali in Gurudev Shantiniketan. Yes. So it was his home. Kutir, and Rabindranath writes that poem Kutir Bashi about him. So I have one image of Taludhaj. Taludhaj now.
Okay. This is a recent picture, is it? Yeah.
And I took this probably the year before last. Yes.
Okay.
One afternoon out on a walk with my son. So that's Taludhaj. Right. So, yeah. And Nandoda seems to have said often about trees এরা ঠিক সময়ে আসে, এদের সময়ের ব্যতিক্রম হয় না, মানুষ পারে না এদের সঙ্গে, মানুষ প্রস্তুত হতে হতেই সময় পার করে ফেলে। So trees know when it's time. Trees mark time rather than human beings. That was the upshot. Before we start talking about the elements and on and the synesthetic uh, 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 journey of the elements into one another, let's perhaps hear Arina sing us that lovely song, এই শ্রাবণের বুকের ভিতর আগুন আছে. I'm particularly struck by that song because it gives us a different kind of mythopoeia. It is possible for the waters to be conceived of as having a fire or a spark of life within it. So water and fire, even as they are two distinct elements, come together in the Tagorean imaginary, and seem to have kind of mingled into this idea of the spark of life, which is also the water that comes from the atmosphere in form of rains. And we two young girls from Shantiniketan, two of my students, Sneha Sharkar and Shiuli Shaha, have very kindly agreed to dance to Arina's rendition. So we'll be listening to the song and also watching them dance. So over to them.
এই শ্রাবণের বুকের ভিতর আগুন আছে, সেই আগুনের কালো রূপ যে আমার চোখের পরে নাচে। এই শ্রাবণের বুকের ভিতর আগুন আছে, ও তার শিখার জটা ছড়িয়ে পড়ে দিক হতে ওই দিগন্তরে। শিখার জটা ছড়িয়ে পড়ে দিক হতে ওই দিগন্তরে। তার কালো আভার কাঁপন দেখো তাল বনের ওই গাছে গাছে। এই শ্রাবণের বুকের ভিতর আগুন আছে। বাদল হাওয়া পাগল হলো, সেই আগুনের হুহুঙ্কারে বাদল হাওয়া পাগল হলো। সেই আগুনের হুহুঙ্কারে দুন্দুভিতার বাজিয়ে বেড়ায়, মাঠ হতে কোন মাঠের পারে বাদল হাওয়া পাগল হলো। ওরে সেই আগুনের পুলক ফুটে কদম্ব বন রাঙিয়ে ওঠে। ওরে সেই আগুনের পুলক ফুটে কদম্ব বন রাঙিয়ে ওঠে। সেই আগুনের বেগ লাগে আজ আমার গানের পাখার পাছে। এই শ্রাবণের বুকের ভিতর আগুন আছে। এই শ্রাবণের বুকের ভিতর আগুন আছে।
Thank you, all of you, Arina, Shiuli, and Sneha. I think it was just wonderful to see that traditional Shantiniketan style dance.
Yeah.
And thank you, Anunadi, for organizing this as well.
I'm very proud of my students. They're
You should
very
be.
good at what they do. Thank you so much, Arina. I wanted to talk about the synesthesia in this song. The idea of fire being somewhere in the in the character of Srabon. You wouldn't normally associate fire with rain, but in the Tagorean imaginary, that he seems to have been able to think in terms of the overlap of the elements. And this takes us back to the idea of connectedness with which we had begun, remember, the connectedness of all life. So and when it comes to history, when it comes to ecology, when it comes to his thinking about community, I think the central kind of impressa would be unity and diversity. And it's become so cliched to talk about it now. But when I talk about synesthesia, I'm trying to bring out that concept, that it is possible for fire and rain to be distinct and yet be mingled in one, or to be intra-existence or inter-existent, if you know what I mean. So Vriksharopon or Holocaustion is marked by the celebration of the distinct character of, it's a kind of integrated prayer to the different elements. So Khiti, which is Mati, which we kind of remembered in that song, Phiritual Mati Tane, has a particular character to it in terms of its ability to hold together. So Antore pak kothin shokti komolata phule potre. That is the character of Khiti, or water, which in Panchabhut Rabindranath wonderfully personifies as Miss Srotoshini, a feminine person who is extremely forbearing, who seems to be able to take a lot of the adversities, that all of it that comes her way, somewhat like my mother, and whose flow is what really qualifies. She seems the fluidity, her readiness to flow with life is what is marked by water. And please, it's important to remember that Rabindranath, particularly after his the wonderful time that he spent in Shilaidaho, which is marked by, which is so memorably documented in that extraordinary book Chinnopatraboli. His letters that he wrote to mostly to Indira Devi Chaudhurani. And it's available in English translation now by Rosinka Chaudhuri. People look it up. So even Rani Chandra kind of marks that, he mentions at one point how Rabindranath was deeply drawn towards water. Deeply drawn towards water. And water has that ability to flow, to take in everything and to flow along. Tej or Ogni is the spark of life. And interestingly, the Upanishads begin with Ogni. And Rabindranath gives it that kind of primacy. Whereas Mati is associated with Tan, with Pul. So he says, Oparthibo ek maya shanti niketoner. E maya ঘর বাঁধায় আবার ঘর থেকে বাইরেও টেনে আনে. And there's something about the ferrous quality of the red earth. এই যে রাঙামাটি বলে না, it kind of sticks to your shoes to this day. So that's a continuity that I want to highlight. So Rabindranath is supposed to have said to Rani Chandra, এ হচ্ছে এই রাঙামাটির টান, ঘর ছাড়ার টান। দেখিস না এদেশে কত বাউল, রাঙামাটির টানে সবাই বেরিয়ে পড়েছে। বলে গাইতেন গ্রাম ছাড়া ওই রাঙামাটির পথে, যে টান, that earth has a pull to it. And that's a particular, there's something about that Shantiniketan probably can also lay claim upon as a place. So but there are so many songs that were actually written and sung by Rabindranath, or given to others to sing, to mark the advent of the waters, or the bringing in of the waters, the water works. And for one song particularly, Hey Akasho Bihari Nirodobahon. So that has it's an occasional song that was sung to mark the
I think it's the tube well thing, right? The digging of one of the tube well. Yeah.
yes, which tells us how water wasn't to be taken for granted in Shantiniketan. It never did rain that much, which is why when it rained, it was a special event, and children marked it the way they did. Um, so, um, well, we've covered a lot of ground. I just wanted to perhaps uh, end this discussion with a reference to a few songs, kind of just in passing to talk that bring out the element of synesthesia. Just a moment. Um, there is মাটির বুকের মাঝে বন্দি যে জল মিলিয়ে থাকে. The very interesting kind of contiguity of water and uh, um, and earth there, that is important. There is the song আজ কি তাহার বারতা পেলে পেলো রে কিশলয়, where there's a particular phrase যেথা চাঁপা কোরকের শিখা জলে, চাঁপা কোরকের শিখা জলে. So fire in flowers. And then there is Sharanishi Chilem Shume, which is a Shorod song, which talks about Tarar Mashi, which I mentioned right at the outset. There is Kar Chokher Chawar Hawai Dolai Mon. What a wonderful conceptualization of the gaze itself as wind, if you see what I mean. And there is Kanna Hashi Dol Dolano, where Shurer Gandho Dhala, আমায় তাই পড়ালে মালা সুরের গন্ধ ঢালা. More importantly, খ্যাপা হাওয়ার ঢেউ উঠেছে চির ব্যথার বনে. So the allegorization where nature is interiorized into the woods of pain within one's own being, and the winds blowing through that, through the woods within. I found that very illustrative, deeply illustrative of the point I was making about nature not being just outside, but also within. And of course, Tumi Shurer Agun Lagiye Dile. And let us, and of course, the song that we heard, Ei Shraboner Buker Bhitor. So let us kind of end perhaps with Arina singing us a song which talks about how, as in Ovid or as in science, so also in the Tagorean understanding, there is no death, there is no end, there is only a transformation or a metamorphosis. So shesh nahi je shesh kotha tike bol.
শেষ নাহি যে শেষ কথাকে বলবে, শেষ নাহি যে শেষ কথাকে বলবে, আঘাত হয়ে দেখা দিল আগুন হয়ে, আগুন হয়ে জ্বলবে, শেষ নাহি যে শেষ কথাকে বলবে, সাঙ্গ হলে মেঘের পালা, শুরু হবে বৃষ্টি ঢালা, সাঙ্গ হলে মেঘের পালা, শুরু হবে বৃষ্টি ঢালা, বরফ জমা সারা হলে নদী হয়ে গলবে, শেষ নাহি যে শেষ কথাকে বলবে, ফুরায় যাতা ফুরায় শুধু চোখে, অন্ধকারের পেরিয়ে দুয়ার যায় চলে আলোকে, ফুরায় যাতা ফুরায় শুধু চোখে, অন্ধকারের পেরিয়ে দুয়ার যায় চলে আলোকে, জীবনে ফুল ফোটা হলে মরণে ফল ফলবে, শেষ নাহি যে শেষ কথাকে বলবে, শেষ নাহি যে শেষ কথাকে বলবে। আঘাত হয়ে দেখা দিল আগুন হয়ে জ্বলবে, শেষ নাহি যে শেষ কথাকে বলবে, শেষ নাহি যে শেষ কথাকে বলবে।
Thank you, Arina, and thank you, Anunadi. It has been such an enriching experience for me, and I'm sure for our audience. I probably do not have enough words to express it. I can only thank you both from the bottom of my heart, and from all over the world, people who are watching it, I'm sure they will also agree with me. This was a very different kind of experience. We have heard about Tagore's idea of nature, and he was an environmentalist and everything, but taking us through all this journey, I really do thank you, Anunadi, for your research and bringing it to us. And of course, Arina, for your beautiful rendition of those songs. Thank you very much. And I would also like to thank our audience who were with us today. And hopefully you have liked it as well, like me. Thank you once again. Thank you.